Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge, the podcast that doesn't take itself or the show too seriously. My name's Zach, and I'm your host, here to let you relive your favorite series that I nearly missed out on, like How I Met Your Mother, a show that I watched for a little while in real time, stopped sometime along the way, and just finally started watching and went start to finish all the way through like 10 years after the series finale. Now, if you're familiar with this podcast, this is going to seem a little bit out of the blue, to be honest. After all, it's not Harry Potter, it's not Sons of Anarchy, it's not Breaking Bad. Hell, it's not even The Office. I didn't tease this show in any way, and we're clearly not doing a complete binge of this show. So I thought I would explain just a little bit. But before I do, shout out to the Bonus Bin Squad on Patreon. Harley 117, and a super duper awesome unnamed individual. If you're part of my core audience, you know that I love basketball. And what does that have to do with How I Met Your Mother? Well, nothing. But it does have to do with me and this podcast. And if you happen to be watching on YouTube, the decor that you see around you. See, not too long ago, I got on this feed with an update to talk about how I had these big plans to like jump back into Sons of Anarchy, to binge that show and overhaul the podcast to be video first and all this added content that I was gonna have with shorts and breakout videos and blah 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 blah. Now, I truly did intend to do just that. I started season 2. I was making multiple videos per episode, shorts and long form and in between. TikTok actually was kind of picking up in a kind of real way. Ironic timing when I think about it. But then a couple things happened. The first one, I was actually picked up by a company that makes sports content with an opportunity to host a podcast about my favorite basketball team. So I guess you could say that technically I'm actually in the NBA media covering my favorite team. And that's honestly something that I've wanted to do since I was a kid. It's why I went after my first radio job in college. It was the career I thought that I'd be pursuing from the beginning. Now, don't get me wrong. Am I some kind of big deal all of a sudden? Of course not. No, I still have my day job that supports my family, and I'm starting from scratch with a podcast in 2025, like everybody else, and much like I did with this one, like over 3 years ago. But I'm doing it with a real company that covers sports. They have podcasts on their network that are like top 1 and 2% in the world, big enough to do things like launch a company. And now I host a show with their name on it. So I'm not doing it alone. And for me, that's that means something. The second thing that happened is that I kind of hated it. Not the basketball podcast. That's actually been going awesome. And if you are curious, I'd be happy to tell you all about it, but not here, not right now, because my assumption is you don't care. No, what I hated was making the Sons of Anarchy videos I was making, particularly the way I was making them. See, I had become so hyper focused on making everything visual, how to make this thing work on YouTube and how to grow the show and be truly multi-platform with this big, you know, content strategy, if you will. And from the way I was watching the show, where the way in how I was crafting each piece of content, and then I had to shoot it, and then I had to edit it to be video focused with a whole bunch of B-roll. I'll be honest with you. I was having zero fun. I was dreading it and I was putting off doing the work. I can't tell you how many times I messaged cousin Amy complaining about how much I was not enjoying making my own podcast. It was exhausting. and one of several things at the time that I was stressing about. I kind of just needed a reset, and I found it in a comfort show. When I sat down to eat or when I just needed to turn my brain off because, well, life, I found this show that I could just watch. And I remembered enjoying How I Met Your Mother when it was on TV. And I remembered that I didn't finish it. I'm not even sure that I started it. And by that, I mean back in the day, me and my dad, we had a couple of things that we bonded over. We bonded over sports and certain TV shows. We would record them on the DVR, and then when my wonky schedule gave me some time at home, we would catch up on them together. And that sounds corny as all hell, but my dad's my best friend, and that's time that I don't take for granted. And one of the shows for a while was How I Met Your Mother. It started back in 2005 when I was like 15. And I don't even remember when we actually jumped into it, but we definitely watched a few seasons together. And I think it was in, I don't know. I don't know if we moved or if we switched cable companies or we just got a different account. What happened? Did we lose our old recordings of it or, whatever reason we had, we just never finished it. Um, and I don't even know where I stopped, but I knew that I didn't remember where the show started. I hadn't seen how it ended, and I didn't even know who the mother was. So I put a few episodes of that show on, and then I watched the whole damn thing. And while I don't have as much to say about that show that warrants a full immediate rewatch or a season by season breakdown necessarily, I enjoyed watching it. And it was truly a belated binge. And after feeling like I had completely lost the whole point of why I started this podcast in the first place, this one smacked me right in the face. So we're going to do a mini binge. I'll hit the cliff notes of the show, share some thoughts, and do the thing that I probably have enjoyed the most on this show and actually any podcast that I make is give out some just silly made up awards. So if you're new, hit follow in your podcast player or subscribe on YouTube. I hope that you enjoy this mini binge, and I welcome you to go back and listen to the first 100 or so episodes that are in the backlog. If you've been here a while, thank you. And however long it may take, I hope that you'll be here for at least 100 more. So now, as I mentioned, How I Met Your Mother premiered back in 2005. It ran 9 seasons, ending in 2014. So I think we've captured the belated part of this binge pretty perfectly. The series finale was over 10 years ago. So I'm guessing you're aware that if you're here, the show was set up around the main character, Ted Mosby, from the future. I believe it was 2030 when he was talking to his kids and telling them the story of, you guessed it, how he met their mother. And then each episode of the series is part of that story. We see it play out in present day. Ted, who's like the hopeless romantic type, single in New York City, navigating the highs and lows of life in your late 20s and your 30s. He's roommates with his best friend and college roommate, Marshall, who's engaged and later marries his college sweetheart, Lily. Ted is the third wheel in this relationship, but for about 95% of the show, they're all completely cool with that. And they actually make a fantastic trio. The three have another friend who's explained to have met Ted sometime before the first episode. His name is Barney, and he's a complete womanizer. The first episode sets the stage for the journey that our characters are going to take when Ted goes on a first date with a woman named Robin. Shenanigans ensue, of course, but the night ends with Ted telling her that, well, he loves her and ruins the whole thing. Still, Robin is new to New York and is weirdly accepted into the friend group to embark on a journey of our 5 main characters, I guess. And the show just kind of keeps this will they, won't they, on again, off again love story between Ted and Robin, balanced by hundreds of failed, maybe this will be the love of my life, shorter and longer relationships for Ted in between. Every character experiences some kind of character journey of ups and downs in a mostly well-written series that can only be described as legend. Wait for it. Dairy. From Lily and Marshall experiencing a breakup and a period of being just friends, a rekindled engagement, getting married, home ownership, experiencing the loss of Marshall's father, and becoming parents. And then you've got Barney growing from the complete douchebag that is constantly using elaborate lies and schemes to sleep with women and perhaps videotaping it without consent, and it's actually kind of problematic, to having his own on again, off again with Robin, a failed engagement to a stripper, actually marrying Robin before they agree that their marriage isn't working, and he goes back to sleeping around until the show ends with him becoming a father from one of his just many one night stands. And while he does not actually marry that mother or anything, he does change to a man who now lives for his daughter. Kind of a chaotic ride for Barney, to be honest. Robin obviously goes through the journey of the Teds and the Barney love interest stuff while never losing her drive for her career, which has always been as a reporter on TV. It acts as kind of a foil to her personal relationships, particularly the romantic ones. Why she doesn't want to settle down with Ted. She doesn't want kids. She wants to travel and work and be a major news anchor. And it's the reason that her and Barney actually end up calling it quits in the end, because they've been traveling around for her job, and that's put a lot of strain on their marriage. And why she sort of falls out of the group at the end of the final season. Of course, that's all like driven also by tension of the on again, off again with Ted. Always the on again, off again with Ted. Will they, won't they end up together? Ted does, in fact, finally meet the woman that he would marry in the final season, and the mother of said kids that he's telling this story to. It's kind of wild. A 9-season run of How I Met Your Mother, and we don't actually meet the mother till the final season, which I guess actually makes some sense, because once you've met the mother, the story's over, right? It's How I Met Your Mother. Anyways, um, then there's always this. They kept this spark alive, this possibility with Robin, because it starts to spin into the one that got away for her because of her career. And while many people don't like the actual ending of the show, it is at least an unexpected outcome for the journey of said show. We learn that Ted has been that was happily married with his 2 kids, and the mother, whose name is Tracy, got sick unexpectedly and passed away. And apparently that happened like 6 years before he started telling his kids this story. In the series finale, Ted's kids give him the encouragement and their blessing to not just get back out there, but to finally go get the woman he still has feelings for, Aunt Robin, which is how she's referred to throughout the entirety of the show when narrator Ted is talking about Aunt Robin. It's like, it's kind of wild when you're in it to have them do so much romantic buildup and and arc and experience between Ted and Robin, when from literally the pilot he has told his kids that's not their mother. It's kind of wild. But his kids do give him the encouragement and their blessing to not just get back out there, but to finally, do the thing with to go get Robin. And he does so with a romantic gesture that calls back to that first pilot episode, showing up to her apartment, calling her to the window with a blue French horn that he had stolen for her on their first date. And if it sounds like I just described to you a drama series, I would understand. But I think that's actually a big part of the why behind this show resonating so well and winning all the awards that it did and being such the success that it was. Yes, it's absolutely a comedy. Every episode is written with endless punchlines and ridiculous nights of drinking that are just a notch or two over the top, but in a way that actually makes complete sense with the premise of the show. When we tell a story, it's completely normal for us as human beings to exaggerate certain details, make it sound cooler than it was, or even simply just remember it being cooler than it was. We're all the star of our own movie, and we all like to look back at some of our fondest memories and think how awesome it was, and maybe forget all the lulls and the kind of downtime between and the times where they were kind of just boring and not really anything going on. That's not how we tell stories. That's not how we remember stories. And this show is a story. It's a recollection of events. So when you think, okay, this is a little much, you might remember that this is a story that's being told from Ted's memory of like 20 or whatever years ago. And sometimes Ted, as the narrator, actually jumps in and says something to the effect of, like, that's how I remember it, in case you forgot that detail yourself. But the fact that it's a comedy within each episode, but the overarching story is very much a drama, I think that's what makes the characters feel real. You feel connected to it. You feel like you can relate. Because while you've likely never been to robots versus wrestlers, you have probably felt the sting of a breakup or been impacted by a loved one that was unexpectedly um, or lost for whatever reason. If you lived on this planet, you felt lost or alone or like you didn't know what you were doing with your life or wondered what you are doing actually matters. And having these characters dealing with the things that you've dealt with yourself and turning that into a master class of written comedy, it makes the show hit home in a way that only the best ones do. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. Some of the story arcs come out of left field, don't feel that natural, or maybe just are kind of dumb. Like Barney and Robin, honestly, it really doesn't make any sense either time that they do it. I'm sure we'll talk about that plenty in this episode. Some of these episodes are also very cringy, and not just because the jokes don't fly in 2025, but like the pretentious college girlfriend coming to town and the weird thing where Lily turns into a confident black woman when her old friend comes around. That episode where they're all trying to make it seem like they went to jail for being so bad when they were younger. Kind of awful. At least cringy. And and the premise is awful. But even when the writing falls kind of flat, the characters are still there. And the acting is quite frankly just top tier. Just about everyone in the main cast has had massive success in their careers. You've got Jason Segel, who plays Marshall and is an absolute movie star as a leading actor and writer. Allison Hannigan as Lily. Her role in the American Pie franchise is literally iconic to my generation. Neil Patrick Harris playing Barney. He's been a star literally since like I've been alive. You know, Kobe Smulders, who plays Robin, was in Avengers. Ever heard of it? Plus also other stuff. It was really just Ted, the main character played by Josh Radnor, that doesn't have this massive credit that's bigger than How I Met Your Mother in his arsenal, but it's not like he hasn't been in a lot of stuff and good stuff. I mean, Not Another Teen Movie is a relic from my coming of age time period in life. It's not necessarily good, but My gosh, was it fun. And that's not to say that the show was just good because the cast was famous. Some of their careers didn't even take off until, like, after or during the show. I say it because these were legitimately great actors, the kind of talented people who can elevate material. So when the material maybe wasn't just completely amazing, they could make it good. And when the material was really good, they could make it electric. And that being said, this show started 20 years ago and it ended over 10 years ago. So it bears the question, does it hold up? And I think it does. Don't get me wrong, there's a certain type of person who would watch it today and find much of the humor to be in poor taste and offensive. And those people's feelings are completely valid because that's the thing about comedy. It's subjective. And where I personally don't have a problem watching something that's been taken or even just being taken out of something because a joke would be considered offensive in today's social climate, there's a lot of there's a lot of that in this show, you know. But for me, I like it perhaps because it's a little bit inappropriate. And inappropriate humor is my favorite kind of humor. And a lot of these jokes were written to be inappropriate even at the time that they took place. So of course, if you slap a 2025 lens over everything, they there will be stuff that did not age particularly well. But for me, that just means that every punchline doesn't hit as hard as, maybe it did originally. There's still a lot of great humor in this show that completely holds up if this is your type of humor. If it's not, then it probably wouldn't have been a show that you enjoyed then, and you're certainly not going to be watching it now. See, for me, what actually does take me out of shows typically, um, eh, when it's made, I don't know, a while back to say, is more the visuals and the dialogue. You know, outside of, humor, things just looking and feeling dated. If there's bad CGI because technology wasn't good when it was made, or the aesthetic just looks old, or the way people act and dress and just the vibes of the show, if those don't land for me because they feel like they were perhaps before my time, that's when it holds up less for me and I have a hard time with it. I can deal with jokes being outdated. I have a harder time with just the the quality of the thing that I'm watching uh not holding up, I guess. And this show to me does not have that problem. For starters, there's not a ton of CGI type stuff in it. It's not heavily reliant on the capabilities of production in the early mid 2000s. And generally speaking, their wardrobes also aren't like they don't go for super trendy or anything like that. So they kind of don't age that much, in my opinion. If they do wear something that might be a little bit cringy, it's typically done as part of the episode to be made fun of for being a little cringy. For the most part, Marshall wears t-shirts, Ted wears button-ups, Barney wears suits all the time. And the women in the show dress mostly like classy or casual. That's kind of the two lanes that they fit in. So nothing jumps out like, oh my gosh, that's so 2008. I can't believe I'm watching this now. Maybe there are people that are hearing this or watching this and see this show that are more fashion focused than me and think, oh my gosh, you're totally wrong. I don't know. Aside from some pretty interesting hair decisions that are made at certain points in the show, um, nothing really breaks for me. So yeah, I think it holds up. And now that we've kind of touched on the gist of the show, you got a got a taste for it. Let's give away some silly made up awards. Some good, some not so good. Around here, we like to call them bingies. We're going to start with the every parent has a favorite child, even when they say they don't award for best main character. It's probably basic or cliche, but I do want to give an honorable mention here to Ted. I actually find him to be a very compelling main character in the show. Um, and uh, Other people probably for this award would give it to somebody like Marshall, who is undoubtedly the most likable character on the show. But for me, despite not always being on board with her specific decisions or the writing around the character, I think that Robin might actually be the best character in terms of having substance and generally making the show better. Ted and Robin's scenes are strong. She gets her own story arc outside of Ted that is generally compelling and interesting. She gets a lot of funny backstory sprinkled in with maybe I should call it sparkled in, like being a teenage pop star, Robin Sparkles, the super inappropriate TV show she had as a teenager. Her stuff with her dad is always just it's kind of like bonkers, wild, also hilarious, all at the same time. Uh, Her career, her independence, all of that is inherently great for her backstory, and she's balanced well with legitimate comedic chops and has flaws. Her character has flaws, and those flaws have a real impact on the outcome of the show. In the final episode, it wasn't her and Ted reuniting after, however long. If that's not what we got, you would have had a feeling of what might have been between them. And that kind of impact from a long-standing character to me is truly meaningful to the show. And her absence from a lot of like the last episode, her absence from the group, it carries weight. And it's not just because the characters comment on her not being around, but you actually feel the fracturing of the group, how it's growing apart. And it's not because they're getting older or because Ted is getting married or anything like that. It's because they miss Robin. And in a weird way, she kind of acts like a glue for the group in a way that you would have never, ever, ever guessed in the beginning when she seemed like she was just the love interest for the main male character. And she was the newest one to the group. And while, yes, she does excel in the role of potential love interest to Ted, she also plays a much bigger role and truly impacts the show in a significant way all on her own. So I'm a fan of Robin. The next award that we're going to do is the they're all really good, so this sucks. But the rules that I made up say I have to pick one award for the worst main character. And I feel like I have to like put myself on the spot for this because I started to do just like worst character and I was like, yeah, I could just pick Stella for leaving Ted at the altar or pick his old college girlfriend who's the absolute worst. But I can't I can't do that. Otherwise, it's not a difficult thought exercise and it's not particularly entertaining for you. I'm honestly I had a hard time choosing what main character I would call the worst, because they're all great in some way. But because I had to pick one, while I find Lily to be a little bit annoying at times and even a selfish character at times, which is probably going to get me in trouble with some How I Met Your Mother fans that might be finding me for the first time. Thanks for hanging out. I love Lily, but like, sometimes she's a little much and not always, whatever. I said what I said. However, that being said, I think the right answer here is Barney. And it's not because he's a womanizer or a genuinely problematic person. I actually like that part. Makes for entertaining show. It's his arc in particular. He has the biggest jump from complete sleazeball to then weirdly super romantic and good-hearted with no real growth between the two. It's just a sudden massive leap from one to the other when they decide that he was going to marry Robin as a way for her to not be the mother. But then when they split up, he goes right back to being a sleazeball again. Again, no warning, just a stark shift. It's explained like, hey, I couldn't be with Robin, so obviously I can't just be in a decent relationship with anyone. So I'm just this guy. It's complete character whiplash. But then you give us that whiplash without it actually paying off, just to regress all the way back to the beginning. And if that wasn't enough, he goes all the way back to the end of the spectrum on the mature side of things when he sees his daughter for the first time. And he breaks down into tears and does it's a really, honestly, it's a powerful scene, between this bond of father and daughter, just his little baby girl. And he wraps up everything by chasing a couple of girls at the bar, and everybody thinks that he's going to try to pick them up like he always does because that's Barney. And he tells them off for their uh, outfits being too revealing or something. But none of it feels earned. None of it feels natural. It's just getting slapped around like one of his kinky one night stands, probably. The next award that we're going to do is the end game we should have gotten award for best side character. And by end game, I don't mean the mother. What I mean is that I think Quinn is actually kind of awesome. I, I didn't know where to go with the supporting character. But when I really thought about it, and I thought about Barney, as I just mentioned, kind of the arc that I think is just chaotic and problematic for him to have gone on in a weird, unearned way to kind of jerking us all around. Quinn is the stripper that Barney gets engaged to. It's like that time between failed relationship with Robin and actually marrying Robin. And it just really, really like almost everything that Quinn was a part of. The intro of them on that double date, she's legitimately hilarious with him. The twist that she's actually a stripper at the club that he goes to like every night, and he didn't even recognize her. And while it's cringy, it's also pretty funny how she plays him up like a pathetic dude who thinks strippers like them for a while. But then having it turn to a way that Barney actually has a serious moment to tell her off, I guess you could say, for not giving him a real chance. And it's a really well written scene. I don't remember the exact quote, but basically he's like, there's there I've been with like a million women who had every reason to like who it was like a mistake for them to be with me, and you're the only person that has ever made the mistake of not giving me a chance. And it's that kind of thing. I butchered the quote, but that was the general gist of it. And honestly, it was a powerful scene, and when they are actually together, she's basically awesome the whole time. And even when they do finally decide not to go through with the marriage because it turns out they don't have that foundation of trust built up that you should have if you're going to marry somebody, it is kind of mature and chill the way that they come to that. They have that scene, that moment where they just have that realization. It was done well to not make it like super ugly. They made an episode around it, but that was more about the prenup, not the actual breakup. So that was interesting. And truly, I believe that if Barney was actually going to have a love story, It should have been with Quinn, the awesome stripper that he fell in love with, not Robin. But at least she does get some extra run in the disastrous bachelor weekend that Robin pulls on him as a prank before they do get married. Of all the random characters that come in, she stands out to me that mostly elevates the story while not driving me crazy when she's on screen. The next award we're going to do is a masterclass in doing more with less award for best running joke. The entire show has a running joke that nobody knows what Barney's job is. And I'm just now realizing as I record this how much of my feelings on this show revolve around the character of Barney. Anyways, all they know is that he works at a bank and he makes a shit ton of money. And he never breaks to tell any of them what he actually does. Even when Marshall starts working at the same bank, or when Ted gets brought in as a freelance architect to build their new bank building, anytime he's asked what his job is, he just shrugs and says, please. And this is meant to make it seem like he's scoffing them, like he's so important or whatever he's doing is just so top secret that they couldn't possibly be let in on it. It's also made pretty clear that whatever his job was, it's not exactly above board. He's always referring to some kind of shady deal or shredding mass amounts of documents that he can't talk about. And then at the very end of the show, before he and Robin get married, he drunkenly reveals to them that please is actually an acronym. It's his title. It stands for provide legal. Uh, I wrote it down. I'm not sure I can even pronounce it. Exculpation, exculpation, exulpation, whatever, and sign everything. Provide legal exculpation and sign everything. Wow, I sound really dumb on my own podcast, and I'm not editing that out. Basically, the bank pays him a shitload of money to be the fall guy on paper for most of its shady deals. And then, in a major plot twist at the end, Barney reveals that he's been working as a mole for whatever organization, the FBI or whatever, to implicate his boss in all of the illegal dealings that have been happening over the several years that he's worked there. And it turns out it's because the guy who stole his college girlfriend and turned him into his suit wearing, womanizing self was his boss at the bank. Is it cheesy and silly? Yes. But it's a very funny way to pay off a gag that ran 9 seasons of a TV show in a way that actually feels incredibly on brand for the character. The next award that we're going to do is the So Bad We Did It Twice award for the worst story plot. Barney and Robin was bad. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because it's basically been weaved in and out of this whole episode why I think it's bad, but I don't think it made sense for them to get together the first time. And it made even less sense when they got married. So there you go. The next award we're going to do is the This Was Almost Legend. Wait for it. Oh no. Oh no. It went too long. Award for worst running joke that was almost really good. And for me, this is slap bet. This gag started out awesome. And then it became just not awesome. And I think it started at slaps giving for me. Marshall does this whole countdown to Barney's next slap, and it ends on Thanksgiving. And that whole episode is a big Lily and her dad reunion, which we'll get into. And all the characters that take turns accepting the honor to slap Barney and then not following through with it so that they can give it to someone else and have this whole, I don't know, it's thing. You know, it's played for suspense, it's played for bonding, and it's just drug on forever for me, and I just didn't like it. And then there was the whole adding more slaps, and there was the weird episode that Marshall is telling this story about training to do the best slap, and it ends up being a parody of like a samurai training movie. And that's not a good episode either. I don't know. Slap Bet was a great running joke that just ran its course for me kind of long before it actually ended. The next award we're going to do is the should have left this one in the past like your other friends from high school award for worst running joke, period. And it's the Schmosby thing. Ted's old friend from high school that always gets super immature. Then he tries to like humiliate Ted when he invites him to his own wedding. The guy sucks. The gag sucks. I'm not a fan of the whole Schmosby thing. So the next award we're going to do is the worst non-main character that wasn't supposed to be awful. And there were actually plenty of characters that were written to be awful. That was their purpose in the show. That's not what this award is for. This is for the character that was supposed to bring value to their scenes, but I couldn't stand it when they were on the screen. And this is Lily's dad. Yeah. Uh did he start as a hey, this guy kind of sucks character? Yeah. But then they kept him around and they kept giving them bonding moments and he was used a lot to be like, "Oh, this guy's so funny and he just doesn't get it and he's the dad that's like not been a good dad." Wow, the whole time. There was no, I don't know. It was, ugh. He wasn't funny. The character sucked. There was no depth. He was too far just out there. The weird board game commercials were sometimes kind of funny, but I don't know. In my opinion, he added no value to the show, and I personally couldn't wait for his scenes to end. And that seems kind of harsh. The final award that we're going to do is the Coulda, Woulda, Shoulda Award for Best Potential Mother That Wasn't. And I don't know if this is truly in the spirit of the name of the award, but whatever. It's fine. I think that most people, if given the chance to answer this question, would say Victoria, thinking that she's the one that Ted should have been with. But because he couldn't let go of Robin, she couldn't commit to him. And while she was right that Ted ultimately had a thing for Robin, that's how the whole show ended. So she was pretty much spot on from Jump Street for this thing. Um, I just am kind of not a fan of ultimatums. So I'm going to go with a deep cut here. The one that I think we should have gotten more from is Trudy. She's only in 2 episodes. First is the one night stand that was so embarrassed she like climbed out the window or whatever. It was in the pineapple episode. But when they actually hung out, they really clicked, and she was really cool. And then when she came back and they did that, I don't know why they did the weird thing when she was like fighting over him with her ex college friend, and I think we were left believing that they had a threesome. And whether he actually pulled that off or not, she could have been a really cool character to explore with Ted more than what they actually did. And let's just face it, if he actually did pull that off, come on, I think Ted would agree. Could have been kept around for a little while, right? Yeah. And what better place to end the awards with a little intrigue and answer the ultimate question? Was it worth the binge? Absolutely. As I said before, I think the acting in this show is phenomenal. The writing style of the storytelling is very compelling. Um, there's a there was a YouTube video that I watched. Never Nothing, I believe, is the name of the channel. Who did a cool job of breaking down actually the difference between How I Met Your Mother and How I Met Your Father, which is a show that I also binged because I just wanted more from this world. If that tells you anything, and we may or may not talk about that show here on this podcast. But just the way that they put stories together for episodes could be really, really, really smart storytelling from a writing perspective. Excuse me. The jokes are funny. It holds up surprisingly well 10 to 20 years later, depending on what season you're watching. It's just a really good, funny binge. And yeah, so that's that. You've made it to the end of this mini binge of How I Met Your Mother. So what's next? Well, as I alluded to earlier, those plans of making this a video first podcast and all that, I think they're great plans for someone else. The thing that I've learned about YouTube over the past few years is that it's always a new audience. The attention span is short. So, in order to feel like I was making something that could actually compete on YouTube, I was completely changing the way that I've made this podcast in the past and dropped almost everything that I enjoyed doing. Plus, editing videos sucks. In short, this has always been a podcast, not a YouTube channel. So, sure, I'm going to turn my camera on and post it on YouTube for people who enjoy watching people that are talking when they're listening or consuming a podcast. But I'm bringing this thing back to what attracted me to doing it in the first place. I want to go on tangents. I want to make up silly awards and I want to connect with my audience. How, how frequently can I make it with the other stuff that I have going on since the basketball podcast is for an actual company? It has to be my top priority with the content stuff, but this is and always will be my baby. So as often as I can binge and talk about stuff, that's how often I'm going to binge and talk about stuff. Will I get back to the other series that I started with? Of course. Maybe not always a single chapter or episode at a time all the time, but yeah, I want to talk about Harry Potter again. I want to keep going with Sons of Anarchy. I want to keep watching Breaking Bad. Hell, I even want to mix The Office back in and anything else that I'm actually watching and I feel like I have something to say about. I'm making up the rules as I go. So as long as you're here and enjoy it, I will be too, as much as I can be. Okay. That's enough for today. Go watch How I Met Your Mother.